Hey, you ready?
I'm nervous.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this trailer episode of I Remember Everything, a Dawson's Creek podcast where we will be talking about every episode of Dawson's Creek in chronological order with spoilers. And we want to do this little trailer episode just to give you all an idea of who we are and what you can look forward to with this podcast. I'm Victoria, and I'm here with my friend and podcast partner, Olivia. And Olivia, why don't you go ahead and tell our new friends a little bit about yourself so they can start to get to know us?
Well, my name is Olivia, and I have been married to my husband, Russ, for about 18 and a half years. So,
he has been a big support.
He has been a huge support. He has helped us with a lot of technical things as we're figuring this shit out. So,
yes.
Thank you, my dear husband. I love you. I also have 3 children. My oldest 2 are boys. They're 15 and 13, and my daughter is 10. I am also an actor. I've done mostly local theater, local film, in front and behind the camera. As an indie filmmaker, you kind of have to wear a lot of hats. So I've done everything from set design, set dressing, hair, costume. I specialize in special effects makeup. So with my day job and my side gigs, I'm a fairly busy person. Oh, a fun fact is my family and I do very extravagantly themed Halloween costumes.
And you posted about that you were on like a board panda quiz, and I think on Reddit, and I was blown away. I'm guessing you just went without sleep for a few weeks.
All of my costumes I usually do within a weekend, the weekend of Halloween. I know when you see them, you'd be surprised.
So you sew them yourself?
I make them all from scratch. So with sewing, I like to do crafts and things like that too. So
do you do cross stitch?
Yeah.
Can you cross stitch I Remember Everything for me?
Yeah, I can. Absolutely.
I am Victoria. I am not married. I am actually happily divorced. This year, I am going to celebrate the 18th anniversary of my 29th birthday. If you can do that mental math, good for you. But what it means is that I am firmly and proudly Gen X, baby.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, proud Gen X, forgotten generation.
Yes. I'm cusp millennial. So I'm that older millennial that grew up without the internet and with it, and like that transition period.
Yeah. So we have a generational divide between us here.
A little bit.
I have 4 kids. My oldest is my daughter. She's 20, and I have 3 boys, 18, 15, and 13. I was trying to think about what my hobbies are. And really, honestly, lately, my hobby has pretty much been Dawson's Creek for a while now. Dawson's Creek fandom, Dawson's Creek fan fiction, 3 months of planning this podcast with you. The only other hobby that I can think of is I'm currently relearning German on Duolingo. Yeah.
I didn't know. That's amazing.
Well, I took German in high school because it was the only language offered in my small high school. And my 15-year-old is taking German, and 2 years they're going to take a school trip to Germany. And we want to go. So I thought it'd be really cool that, to go back and learn it. I'm a lawyer. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, so you're an asshole and you're rich. I'm not an asshole. I try really hard to be a nice lawyer. And also I practice in a rural area of Iowa. So I'm not like making the huge bucks. Before that, I worked at a publishing company because I have an undergrad and a master's in English. So that's why I'm kind of really more into characters.
We got to talk about Dawson's Creek now. That is why the people are here. They could care less about us. We know. I have to ask you, what are your Dawson's Creek origin stories?
So it's kind of funny because I was thinking about it, and I kind of have multiple Dawson's Creek origin stories. When it originally aired, I was 21. It was in my 4th year of college, not last 4th. So I watched it, but not like religiously because I was too busy going to the bar and, hence not graduating in 4 years. And I kind of watched it on and off through, I would say, season 4. And then I
Mhm.
kind of fell off. And then in the fall of 2001, I was pregnant with my daughter and I got put on bed rest. And at home, I wasn't in the hospital. TBS aired 2 episodes of Dawson's Creek every day. And I caught it right when they were starting with the pilot. And so through bed rest and maternity leave, I saw all the way through the series
Oh, wow.
as through season 4. And so then I picked back up and watched the rest live as it aired. Basically, sometimes I would have a few drinks and watch the back end of season 3 over and over again. In early 2020, I separated from my now ex-husband and had my kids half the time. So half the time I didn't know what to do with myself.
Mhm.
And it was the beginning of the pandemic. Dawson's Creek was on Netflix. It's when a lot of people I found kind of discovered it for the first
Yeah.
time. I rediscovered it and started a new rewatch. And that's when I got into Dawson's Creek podcast. I started with Dawson's Critique. And that's when I really kind of dove back into it and started rewatching it again. And since then, it's just been kind of a constant in my life. It's become my comfort show. So yeah, how old were you when it first aired? You didn't watch it originally, right?
No, I was in 7th grade when it first aired. So
Oh Christ, that makes me feel old.
I know. Don't. It came out January of 1998. And I remember other kids watching it. Like I remember people talking about it. I didn't really watch a lot of TV at the time. I tried to stay away from home. And this is going to come up in the podcast. I came from a kind of a rougher childhood in a lot of ways. I'm in a place where I can talk about that and I'm grateful for it. But I think as a kid, I had to be very much of an adult. And so I think I had to convince myself that I was above that.
Frivolous TV.
Yes, because my life just didn't make that possible with my home life. I didn't really have like a lot of those things that a lot of youth go through at that time.
Yeah.
And so I did kind of look down on it. There is very much a feeling of reclaiming my youth as an adult, as
I love that.
I'm getting to watch my children, letting them experience their youth. But there's parts of me that I didn't get to experience. And some of them are silly things like TV shows. I have such an amazing husband. He's such a good sport. Like he
is awesome.
100% knows about my obsession with Dawson's Creek. He literally for my
Well, and
birthday bought
I
me
was
a
gonna
Dawson's
say-
Creek mug and was like,
was
I
gonna say,
almost
yeah.
bought you a Pacey pillow.
My God, I want a Pacey
It's-
body pillow. Do they have Pacey body pillows? That's what I want.
I don't know about that. The one he showed me, it was just like a throw pillow with a bunch of like head cutout faces of Joshua Jackson as Pacey.
Love it. Yes, love
Now
Russ.
you know what to get me for Christmas. So
Yes,
I see.
exactly. And you know what points that he knows you well enough that he got you that and respects it and isn't like, I'm a man and how dare you think this other guy is hot or you have a crush. But
He
like,
doesn't get it. He doesn't. He's
Yeah, he
I'm
doesn't
like,
get it, but he respects it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You know,
He's
which
like
I
of
love.
all people, Joshua Jackson. I'm like, yeah.
Dude, tell him to look at the size of Joshua Jackson's hands. Or maybe he wouldn't maybe that would
He
just
wouldn't
make him further
understand.
not understand.
He wouldn't understand. So
Yes.
let's fast forward to now 2020. At the time, as everyone else, my kids were sent home from school. All 3 of my kids were in different schools. So they all had different schedules and trying to keep them from killing each other and getting their schoolwork done and really struggling with that. And then I worked part-time at home.
And
And
not
I
losing your
couldn't-
mind.
Yeah, I couldn't get my work done with them at home. By the time I'd get them to bed, I would then have to start my job around 10 at night and I'd get done somewhere between 2, 3, 4 in the morning
My
and then do it all over again. And so I wasn't really getting a lot of like me downtime. I was like, well, I don't want to put anything I'm invested in on in the background, but I still want to have something. And Dawson's Creek popped up and I was like, I've never watched that. And truth be told, I didn't like it at first. I don't know if I told you that.
You never told me that. How dare you? You did not.
I had it in the background.
Wow.
Season 1, I was like, I didn't really like Dawson. And we'll
okay,
talk about
that's valid.
I struggled to connect with Jen and Joey and even Pacey, especially in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
It really wasn't until season 2. Like I was just having it on as noise. And I think in season 2, I started zoning in on certain characters and realizing there's a lot of things I connected with those characters. And then I started paying attention And then I think I ended up going back and re-looking at some of the previous scenes because I was half paying attention, half not caring. And it made me want to go, well, what did I miss that this is where this character is now?
I understand why you didn't like season 1. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, well, the pacing tomorrow thing, just right away, it makes it hard to watch, but that makes complete sense. But I never knew.
I know, especially like with how much I really care for the show now.
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously you're obsessed enough that you're doing this podcast now. So the fact that you pushed through to get to season 2.
So let's talk about how we decided to do a podcast, Victoria.
Yeah, I had been thinking about how I wanted to do a podcast because I like talking and I love Dawson's Creek. So
talking, no,
I
never.
know it's really weird. Apparently, I have a lot of Leo in my chart. So I've been thinking about it and wanting to do Dawson's Creek podcast and trying to think of who would be a good podcast partner. And you and I, the way we really met is you were part of a Discord server, which is a Dawson's Creek server. So we did rewatches where we'd watch the episode and start talking. And you and I ended up talking for hours after everybody else hung up.
Yeah.
And we found ourselves talking about the characters and the story and relating it to our own lives. And it started to build into a friendship because I don't think we've mentioned this yet, but you and I have never met in real life.
Nope.
We have only quote unquote known each other for, I don't know, 6 to 9 months and only through the internet.
Yeah.
So,
and only like more intimately, I guess is the word, was really since the fall. Like when I started kind of doing the watches.
Yeah. It was amazing how talking about this, as we said, kind of stupid 90s teen drama built a friendship between us. The reason I even got the courage to ask you is I had a couple of drinks and I'm like, I want to do this. I want to ask Olivia. And so I sent you a message and was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a Dawson's Creek podcast. Will you do it with me? And as soon as I sent it, I freaked out. And I sent you like 5 more messages. Oh my God.
Wait, hold on. Let me just say, I saw your message, but I was like putting kids to bed. And I was like, oh, I was like, felt really honored, but I was like, okay, I need to respond to this, but I'm putting kids away.
And
so
my anxiety took over. And I was like, so I sent 5 messages like, oh my God, don't feel bad if you want to say no. I'm sorry. Am I being weird? And then I realized I was being weird by sending all these messages, asking if I was being weird. And then you responded and you were like, oh my God, I would love to do it. So we were messaging back and forth.
Yeah.
And then we got on the phone. I think we were probably on the phone for probably 3 or 4 hours that night.
Yeah.
But the number one thing that you said to me was, I would love to do a Dawson's Creek podcast, but there are a lot of great Dawson's Creek podcasts out there. What can we bring? What can we say differently about this show or say in a new way, or what perspective can we bring that has not already been done? So why don't you explain what it is that they can look forward to in this podcast?
Well, there are a couple things I think we have to offer. One of them, as we mentioned, is we are mothers with current 15-year-old boys. But as a parent, I think that puts a different viewpoint on how we view Mitch and Gail.
And I'll jump into that. I'm divorced. And so the whole thing of how Dawson reacts to his parents' relationship, and especially how a 15-year-old boy reacts to being told that his parents are getting divorced and how that affects kids.
What I think we connected on was the character and the narrative of the story. And the connecting arches and themes. Whenever we've talked about it, we're always like, what was driving this character? Why did they make this choice? And even sometimes that's a fight between what feels true to the character and then what did the writers do? Like, why did they make that choice when they've established this character for 3 years who wouldn't have made that choice? And so with that comes this idea of justification, and how do we justify it? Do we just chalk it up to writers? But the truth is, we just really enjoy talking about these fictional characters as if they're real. I am a very empathetic person. So and maybe that is another reason, is we connect more on like an emotional level versus a storytelling level.
Also, because you obviously have, a theater background, you're, an actor. And so when you do that, you have to get inside a character's head. You have to
Mhm.
become that character. You have to understand the motivations. And so you connect very much with the character aspect of it. And
Mhm.
myself, as having had a background in literature and being a writer, I connect very much with characters
Yeah.
and seeing it from that point of view. And we've talked about this too, that I remember one night we were talking, and as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, you're Jen. Oh my God, you're Joey. Oh my God, you're Pacey. Like you had so many connections to all those different characters. And
Mhm.
as I've thought about it, having so many different connections myself to the different characters. And so I think that that's really where we come from. And as I said, there are a lot of really great podcasts out there already about Dawson's Creek,
Yes.
but they kind of have really looked at it as Dawson's Creek almost as a time capsule. Like we know that Dawson's Creek did some very progressive storylines and everything, but it's also looking back at it, very problematic.
Yeah.
And I think that the podcasts that are out there that you and I both really respect have really tackled those problematic aspects, patriarchy, classism,
Yeah.
sexism, racism. They have tackled those things so well that I think you and I believe that neither one of us can say anything more or better than they already
Mhm.
have about that part of Dawson's Creek. When we get to that stuff in Dawson's Creek, we're going to acknowledge it because it's there, but
Yeah.
also that's not what we're going to focus on. We're going to say, you know what, we acknowledge this, but more, how did the racism affect the character?
Mhm.
Rather than how do we see it as a cultural impact?
Yeah. And I think that was another thing we talked about is you and I both came from very conservative backgrounds, very
Yeah.
conservative towns. Like while you grew
Yes.
up in a really small town, predominantly white, near
100% white,
closer to the
literally.
East Coast, like you're more East Coast bound.
Midwest.
Midwest. For me, it's East. I'm Arizona.
I'm literally in the middle of the country, Olivia.
In my head, you're East, okay?
I understand. I'm in Iowa. There's not much more Midwest than
Okay.
Iowa.
You got me there. Geography. Great. Okay, but so my hot ass who lives in Arizona in the Satan's armpit, okay? For me, that is just East.
I grew up in a town of 3,500 people. There are 3 stoplights
Wow.
in my town. And when I grew up there, it literally was 100% white. And so I relate very much to Cape Side. So when I listen to people talk about the show and they're like, this isn't realistic or that isn't realistic, I'm like, look, there are towns that don't have Black people. While we always want to see representation, also the representation may be of a person in 100% or predominantly white thing. And how does that affect them?
Yeah.
So while it's always great to see representation of people of
Mhm.
color and homosexuality and everything like that, it is also, I think, interesting to look at the representation of a person who did not grow up that way. And so when people say, well, they should have more Black people in the show, yeah, that would be great. But also, it's authentic that there are towns like this.
Yeah.
And we need to acknowledge that just as much as anything else.
Yeah. So coming from a religious conservative home as well, where purity culture was very much a thing. And I think that filters a lot of the ways that I view, especially like Jen and Joey a lot in my relationship with them.
My family was religious as well.
Mhm.
And fairly conservative. And I have a lot of relation to Jen because although I grew up religious, I am now, an atheist, agnostic, whatever. So some of those conversations with Jen and Graham's, I have a lot of feeling of relating to Jen and some of those things and those struggles of questioning that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think another thing coming from those backgrounds, a lot of the behavior that I think a lot of other podcasts mention that coming from their liberal towns or liberal backgrounds at that time, they're like, I could not imagine someone behaving like Pacey did in season 1. Dude, I remember when a boy acted like that, that was charming. And it wasn't looked at as problematic in any way.
Nope.
And so when we talk about things that are problematic, we know they are in 2023, but at that time, I would have definitely have found this charming because that was what was put out as charming in the media. And we didn't know how to have boundaries at the time. So
no.
The
next thing that you and I have talked about with the podcast is we love Pacey. We
Mhm.
are not Dawson fans. However, we have talked about the fact of, is Dawson a monster or is he just a flawed individual? And trying
A
to go
reflection
into,
of that time and white male who
yes,
grew up in privilege.
yeah. Was that maliciousness there?
Mhm.
Was that intentionality there? Or was he just a product of what was going on? And trying to go into it with a little bit more of an open mind of looking at Dawson from maybe a different point of view than we have been for the last couple of years of like,
Mhm.
is he problematic? Is he an asshole? Yeah, look, you're never going to convince me that he is the hero of this show.
No.
However, I do think that at times people, and myself included, are too hard on him. I think that there's a difference between excuses and explanations.
Mhm.
So we can explain why we think Dawson acts a certain way without excusing it. And I think that that's
Yes.
something that I really want to focus on, not just for Dawson, but for so many of the characters when they make mistakes. We're not going to excuse when they do something bad, but we do want to try to explain it and understand it. And I think
Yeah.
that that's a very big difference.
I think with explaining and not excusing, we're still holding people accountable, but
Yes.
also putting into perspective what are choices? Are they willing to grow? Are they trying to change? Do they recognize their mistakes? And would
Mhm.
they have had to be accountable for the mistakes in the society they
Mhm.
lived in? Hopefully now in this society they would, but at that time, because we're talking about the show from 1998 to 2003. And I
Yep.
think that's what we want to do, is focus in that time
Yep.
period and also really celebrate the things that were progressive.
Yeah.
And
Even if
and
they didn't
again,
go as far as we wanted to, let's celebrate what they did do.
right.
What the fact that we can now look back on it and say this was still problematic shows how much we've grown. There is, I think, a space to, as you said, when they make a mistake, do they learn from that mistake
Mhm.
and then grow and rectify the behavior, or do they double down on it? And give accountability, like
Mhm.
put that accountability on them, but then also allow them to apologize and change, because none of us is perfect.
I do think it brings up to our next point, Victoria. Our next point is, because we know that our main characters are flawed, we want receipts. Cha-ching.
Give me the receipts, Olivia. How are you going to give us the receipts?
Well, let's see. As a person who loves to organize things to de-stress, I have made some charts. We have
lots of charts,
lots of Excel spreadsheets, let me tell you. Yeah, our goal is to really track the characters per season and pay attention to when they're intentionally lying and who's lying to who, when someone is putting down someone and to who, when they apologize, and kind of discuss that. And when we finish this, we know for a fact that this person does this no, hold on.
Is the word you're looking for consistently?
Yes.
Okay.
Could not get it out. We can look at
not editing that out. Not editing that out.
Okay, can I just tell you right now? My husband is going to listen to this and laugh at me. He calls them Olivia-isms. There are just times my brain blinks and I go, I know the word sounds like I just can't get the right word out, or I mix up phrases and saying. I blame there's a lot of things I can blame, but I do it. And he has a whole book that he has tracked my Olivia-isms since we were married.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's adorable. That's ridiculously adorable. And I love you, and also kind of want to punch you a little bit. And one of the things we talked about, relating it back to Dawson, is we're like, Dawson never apologizes and Dawson's awful. And we're like, you know what? Let's track it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the season, we might find out maybe Dawson did apologize more than we realized. Maybe Pacey was more of an asshole than we realized.
Yeah.
And we were just blinded by the size of his hands and couldn't see anything else. Yeah. So listeners, at the end of every season, we're going to have a wrap up of Olivia's tallies where we give you the receipts. And so if you want to come at us and say you're too hard on Dawson, we can say, well, actually, we're not, because look at this. We don't want to just talk out of our ass here. We obviously have opinions based on our emotional reaction to the characters, but we also want to look at it in an objective way too. And so that's why we want to have the receipts. This is a spoiler show, and we wanted to include spoilers because I think that if you're really going to dig into these characters, you have to acknowledge what we know happens later on. And I'm going to relate that back to my educational background of literature. When we do critical essays of books and characters, you can't analyze a character from just the first chapter of the book. You have to analyze the character from everything you know. And so while we may not go extensive into a future episode, we may refer to it because it's going to influence how we see that character. And also, how do we know the character is going to grow? If you have not seen Dawson's Creek, go fucking watch it because it's amazing.
Or
Go
listen
back
to
and
one of the
listen.
other amazing podcasters that are
Yes.
spoiler free and join their
Yes.
journey. There are great ones out there.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing podcasts out there. Listen to them and then come back.
And the
Great.
truth is what we're really going to prove is the fact that you and I, with our obsessive nature of this show, we really do remember everything.
Literally, we are at the heart of this. We are two grown-ass women who love this teen drama and want to talk about it with each other and want to share our opinions. And we hope that people will join us on this journey. Of course we do. But at the end of it, I think that we are just really excited to be able to do this with each other. And I tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this podcast with my friend Olivia. Yeah, we've never met in real life, but we have already developed a pretty good, deep friendship. And I think that that's going to be a fun thing going forward. Like already in this episode, we've learned new things about each other.
I know we don't have that history that a lot of the other ones
No.
have. And these people have years on us. We're like, we've been talking for 3 months.
I know. So I think it'll be fun because as the listeners get to know us, we continue to get to know each other too. And however this podcast turns out, I'm just excited and thankful to be doing it with you.
I'm so excited too, Victoria.
You and I think that given our shared experiences and also our very different experiences, bring out different things about the show.
When we've talked about our different experiences is how much I could relate to the emotions, even if the experiences were different. And we recognize because we're going from a character perspective that we are going to talk about the ways that we connected and how I think other people connect. We want to have a fun show and we will laugh, but we probably are going to open up about our own experiences just in relation. And hopefully you guys don't get sick of us. And
we are going to be vulnerable. And there are things that are kind of maybe some difficult subjects that we talk about that relate to the show. And that's not always awesome and fun, but it is part of what has drawn us together as friends. And so while we are going to have fun with this, because we love this show and we are so enthusiastic about it, but also we're not going to ignore the fact that this show also has some really deep emotional roots. And the reason that people, not just us, that people are still talking about the show 25 fucking years later is because the emotions are universal. Anyone who loves this show knows that it's awful at times, but it is also amazing and beautiful. And so we want to celebrate the awesomeness of this show, but we're also not going to shy away from the fact of when it sucks or when it hits some really deep emotional things, because that is one of the progressive things of this show was it did explore some really important topics, homosexuality, mental illness, a lot of different things. And we don't want to shy away from those things because that is why people are still talking about it today.
I think another goal of ours was to kind of help broaden this Dawson Creek community. We plan on actually each episode is to suggest a fan fiction. We're planning on having a Discord channel so we can talk about the episodes.
Yes. And you were talking about how you didn't watch it because it was you kind of dismissed it as this, teen drama. that we have seen it now that it's not just a teen drama and how it can connect people. And so we want to broaden the community of, step out of the shadows, like be like, you know what? Yes, this is a good show and I'm going to talk about it.
And I would tell you a year ago, I would have been too embarrassed to say that I read fan fiction, but it used to embarrass me. And now
I don't anymore.
I just don't care. Why should I care?
Agree. And
if it makes me happy.
And that's the thing is that I was talking to one of my best friends and I was like, look, I'm so into this Dawson's Creek thing, but I know it's really nerdy. And he was like, Victoria, if it makes you happy, who the fuck cares?
Yeah, I accept its nerdiness, and what's funny, even the fan fiction thing, right? So I have mild dyslexia, I was in honors classes and didn't even find out I had dyslexia till my senior year. Right. And so crazy. I just missed a lot of opportunities to know how to manage that. That's all. So reading has actually always been a struggle for me. I couldn't understand how people could get invested in reading because it's very hard for me to create those images of worlds and characters. And so starting a new story is difficult. And I've read a lot of basic series, but it is just a little hard to get into them. And especially when I'm busy and I'm a mom who has several jobs and the reason we couldn't even do the podcast right away, I was in a play and we didn't have time with my rehearsal and performances. We had to wait till that was done.
We want to make sure we're putting out the content that people want to listen to. And so, neither one of us have done anything like this before. No. We've never done a podcast. So, bear with us. We're figuring it out. We are open to constructive criticism, but I will say that the fact that we have spent 3 months planning this before we got to this point, I hope just shows that our heart is in this. Just know that whatever we're doing for love of these characters. And I think that that's something about fan fiction too, of why we invest in the fan fiction is because we love the characters so much.
Well, and that's what I was going to say was when it came to the reading, going into fan fiction, I already know how those characters physically move, how they say their lines. And so for me, who struggles with creating those images, unless I can really take the time to do it, which with my life is hard, going into fan fiction, it's like, I already know these characters. And so I can just dive into reading and having that joy of reading without being stressed about it. And so that is a nice thing. And I think I didn't understand that of fan fiction. I had a very different idea of what fan fiction was.
So we talked about that we're going to have a Discord channel and we're going to have a link tree and it will have the links to all our social media, including the Discord channel. And our plan is also that we're going to do weekly episodes. We're going to drop on Wednesdays. You'll be able to find us on all the major podcast places. I hope you guys follow us, share. We want to really interact with all of you because, again, going back to what Olivia said, we really want to build the Dawson's Creek community because I think it's a community that's important, but has been just really kind of overlooked.
Well, I think a lot of it is there's such a stigma of what's considered worthy of adults' attention. Like I said, I feel like I've gone through this journey of reclaiming my childhood, just going, it is okay to care about things that you want to care about and not have to feel bad about it or feel ashamed. The idea of what's the word? It's blanking on me, a guilty pleasure. Why should it be guilty? If you pleasure it and it's fun and it doesn't hurt anyone and it doesn't hurt you, then there's no reason to feel guilty about enjoying something.
Yes. And I totally agree. And that was beautifully said, but my mind went to a little bit of a dirty place. You start talking about if it pleasures you and it's not hurting anyone.
True. True. Look, if no one's hurt, everyone's giving consent.
I am the gutter mind here. And I was just listeners, you can't see me, but I had my hand over my mouth because I was this is sounding a little sexy. And I know she's making a really important, poignant point. But all I could think was sex.
I don't always realize I say things that are sexual.
Well, don't you worry. I will point them out. Olivia's mind is very good. I am a little bit dirty.
You'll see. I have my moments.
Moments, but
I mean,
I do go to the gutter quicker.
that's true. That I will give you that based on our conversations we had. But I really love it about you.
I will take that trophy.
There's going to be a lot of us maybe inappropriately sexualizing some of these characters and how attractive they are.
We will be talking about the size of Joshua Jackson's hands.
A lot.
Probably a lot. And also I want to say, Joshua Jackson, if you ever listen to this, I am really sorry.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
We respect you as an artist and an actor, but also
yes,
hands. All right. So to wrap this motherfucker up, so the point of a trailer is to give the potential listeners a taste of what it will be like to listen to our podcast. Do you feel we have done that here tonight? Good for better or worse?
For better or worse. I mean, the best that we're capable of telling them, sure. I think they're just going to have to go along for the ride and hope that it will be better. We do plan on going through the episode, one episode at a time, starting with first season, focusing mostly on that season with small references to the future.
Yes.
We don't want to get so caught up talking about future episodes that when we get to those episodes, we've lost the ability to talk about it from that place because we've already said it.
We don't want to be restricted by this point thing. And what I will say too, as to your point about the organization, this was kind of a free for all. We had some bullet points that we want to talk about, but it was really about us chatting and letting you all know that kind of who we are. And I think our personalities came through.
Hopefully people liked them, possibly. Or they'll just be like, oh, those women. I don't stingy.
Let's stay away from that. But yeah, so thank you all for indulging us today, and we hope that we didn't scare you off. We hope that you will go ahead and tune in moving forward. We hope you join us for this journey and not just listening to us, but engaging and building the community. And as we said, what's really amazing is we have found a very cool friendship through this show, and we would love to be able to expand that. So right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Couldn't have said it better myself, Victoria.
All right. So until next time, thank you all for listening. Olivia, love you, darling.
I love you too. Mwah.
All right.